Weisinger. He's going to talk about performing under pressure. All yours. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Hank Weisinger, as I like to be called, and I appreciate you all taking time to tune in. And my goal here is to make this a very engaging experience. I want to share some of the findings that I have figured out from all the research that I have been doing for over 25 years on the subject of performing under pressure. I'm going to walk you through some of the slides that you have in front of you. I doubt we're going to get to go over every single piece of information, but my main goal is to get you to look at how pressure impacts you and then how best to deal with it. The crucial concept, of course, is going to be what I like to call taking action. And taking action means that inevitably you have to do what we are going to be speaking about. I used to live in Los Angeles. I did a lot of therapy when I lived out there. I always like to say that if you live in LA, you have to do therapy, but I was licensed to do it. And I would see people come into my office and, excuse the language, they'd be screwing up their lives and they didn't know why. And I would always call these people unconsciously incompetent. They were lousing up their lives. They didn't know why. And then after a few sessions of therapy, they would develop insight. Now they become consciously incompetent. They're lousing up their lives. They know why, but nothing has changed. And nothing has changed because they did not take action. You cannot take a Jane Fonda home video, stick it in your VCR, lie in bed, watch it, and expect to get in shape. You need to do it. So I'm going to give you a lot of information, but in the end, if you really want to improve your ability to perform under pressure, you're going to have to do, not just think about, but actually do what we are going to discuss. If you go to the page that says agenda, you'll see a bunch of points: pressure assessment, understanding pressure, some pressure facts, and then, of course, some pressure solutions. And on the very next page, we see what a pressure moment is. I want to start out by getting you to really understand when you experience pressure and also how it differs from stress. I have found the most frequent question that people ask in a presentation is, what is the difference between pressure and stress? First of all, think of a pressure moment. In a pressure moment, when you actually experience pressure, it doesn't matter whether you're trying to kick a field goal or whether you are trying to give a presentation. What makes a pressure moment is the same for all of us. And you see what the definition of pressure is: a situation in which you have something at stake and the outcome is dependent on your performance. And if you look at those 4 points underneath that definition, you'll start to get a feeling of how pressure can be regulated. First of all, the word important. I want you to realize that because we all do things that are important, pressure is actually inherent in life. And the more important a situation is, the more pressure you will experience. If you have kids, for example, it's counterintuitive, but telling them that a test is really important actually is not a good parental strategy. You're actually increasing the pressure. I know it sounds kind of silly, but telling your kids a test is no big deal is a much better way to go. In all pressure moments, there is uncertainty. Uncertainty, remember, translates into anxiety. The more uncertain you are, the more pressure you will experience. If you are a sports fan, you're not really watching the end of a game if your team in football is up by 30 points. On the other hand, if the outcome is still in question and there's a minute left, you're probably like hundreds of thousands, millions of other people sitting on the edge of your seat. Third is responsibility. The more responsibility that you feel for the outcome, the more pressure you will experience. This is why when you don't really care about the outcome, it's no big deal. And that becomes a mental set that all of you will be better off having to minimize the significance of a situation. And finally, you get the fourth factor, the aversion of outcome and desire for the incentive. The more you want the incentive, the bonus, for example, the job, the part in a play, the team to win, the more pressure you experience. And the more you fear the outcome, the more pressure you will experience. Now, understand how these factors come together, starting with importance. What do you think the first pressure moment for man was? You can count on the fact that it was survival oriented, life and death. So many times we react as though our life depends on a situation. That is what I like to call primal pressure. Primal pressure was for your ancestors because for them, their life was dependent on whether they can make a 10-foot jump or not. If you give a bad presentation, it might seem like your life is dependent on it, but the reality is you're still going to have your job tomorrow. The uncertainty for early man was whether he was going to survive or not. That would be a lot of anxiety. So when you put these factors in context, what you will see, something that is true for all of us. Pressure is inherently distressful. Nobody ever comes home and says to their partner, I wish I was under more pressure. When was the last time your kids came home from school and complained, Dad, Mom, there's not enough pressure at school? Very few people like pressure. And by the way, for those people like athletes who say they thrive on pressure, what you're going to find out in a few minutes is that is not true. So that's the definition of pressure. A situation in which you have something at stake and the outcome is dependent on your performance. Now, whoops, I think that I had to change presentation, and that is the wrong thing to. This is a pressure moment. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now, here's the first question I want you to think about. Under pressure, in that situation where you have something on the line, and the outcome is dependent on your performance, do you think that you perform the same as usual, less than your best, or better than usual? Take a few seconds to think about that. Because if you say that you perform the same as usual, you are actually in the minority. If you say that you perform less than your best, you are in the majority. And if you say that you perform better than usual, the fact of the matter is you are delusional. Let's look at the next slide and get some pressure facts. First of all, the biggest revelation that I found writing this book is this. Nobody does better under pressure. I used to think that the edge was rising to the occasion, coming through in the clutch. The reality is that is not the edge. The edge is not doing worse. There are no athletes that rise to the occasion. I'm a big baseball fan, so I'll use a baseball example with one of my favorite players, Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter's lifetime average in the regular season was .310. That is a Hall of Fame number. In the playoffs, his lifetime average for postseason play was also .310. He did not rise to the occasion. He just didn't choke. Choking means that you do below your capabilities when you want to do your best. We have a lot of myths about pressure, and one of them is what I like to call the Roy Hobbs myth. I'm a big movie fan, so I like to use a lot of movie examples. And for those of you who saw the film The Natural with Robert Redford, where he plays the character Roy Hobbs, greatest baseball player of all time, the last scene, he's up with the games on the line. This is a scenario that every baseball fan has seen thousands of times. And what does he do in the movie? He hits a home run, wins the game, and everybody is saying, Roy Hobbs, he's the greatest, the best there ever was. Well, in the book called The Natural, which was written in 1952 by Bernard Bauman, the character strikes out. That is reality. Nobody rises to the occasion. All NBA athletes, for example, in playoffs, shoot worse from the foul line than they do in the regular season. Some of you out there think that you become more creative in a pressure moment. Sorry, it is just the opposite. In a pressure situation, you become less creative. Some of you think you do more effective work when you're under the gun with a time limit. Sorry, time and time pressure makes everybody do worse. Some people think that under pressure your true character comes out. Well, if that's true, we all are in trouble because the reality is pressure bends your ethics. Think of how many CEOs do bad things and then of course they blame it on, well, I was under a lot of pressure. I wasn't thinking clearly. Now, so those are all myths. The facts are these. One, pressure adversely impacts our cognitive success tools. That means your judgment, your decision making, your memory, your attention, all are downgraded in a pressure moment. Pressure also downgrades your behavioral skills. How many times have you seen a movie where a person is really scared and they are fumbling with their keys? They can't even stick their keys into the door or start their car. On a golf course, that means tightening your grip and missing a 2-foot putt. Your behavioral skills are all downgraded. Uh, Three, in pressure moments, most people perform below their capability. Now, many of you work in organizations. I have worked with hundreds, literally hundreds of Fortune 500 companies. Ask yourself, look at your training programs. Do you have a pressure management course there? Because if you don't, I don't understand why you don't. I am telling you that people do below their capability in a pressure moment. People in sales do worse when they have something on the line, not better. They are not rising to the occasion. So one of the recommendations that I tell companies all the time is to start to integrate pressure management. You have stress management, but stress and pressure are not the same. You have never seen a final set or final point at Wimbledon where the announcer is saying the stress is really increasing, but you have heard the pressure is increasing all the time. Pressure brings out our worst, not our best. And on a subjective level, pressure is more of a feeling that you have to produce. Stress is more of a feeling that you are overwhelmed. That is a big difference. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you can take a nap and re-energize yourself. If you have to land a plane on the Hudson River, taking a nap is not going to be very useful. One of the other things I've also learned is that pressure is often camouflage. In other words, the parent who says to his son or daughter, do well on your math test and I'm going to get you that iPod, you just motivated your kid to cheat. That's what incentives often do. They distract us from doing our best, and we do strange things because we want those incentives. So many companies actually think by giving out incentives and motivating by incentives, you're actually increasing the amount of pressure and also motivating your employees many times to bend the rules because they want that incentive. A parent, for example, social support, who says to his son or daughter, Uh, I'll be sitting in the third row during your music recital. I know you're going to make us proud. You're causing your son or daughter to do worse. And also remember something as a parent, it is not your kid's job to make you feel proud. That would be like your kids coming home from school and saying, you know, Dad, I'm really tired of being dropped off at school in a Prius. Could you get an AMG Mercedes like the other fathers have and make me proud of you? Just work a little harder. Or can you imagine the girl saying to her mother, Mom, you got to do something. You're 30 pounds heavier than the other mothers. Please make me proud of you and get in shape. But parents do that to our kids. We do that all the time. So the idea of this point is many of the conventional ways, the traditional ways of how we think are going to motivate people, giving them incentives, giving them social support, creating a sense of competition, actually increase pressure and make us do worse. Many cultures, organizational cultures, like to build up a competitive environment. I will tell you, there are just hundreds and hundreds of studies that show competition brings out the worst in people, not the best. You are much better off fostering a situation, environment that breeds cooperation rather than competition. And I think the last point, nobody can deny. Today we feel increased pressure, and there are a lot of reasons. We're not going to go into them for time management's sake, but one that very few people think about is longevity. Everybody is living longer. You know, when I was growing up in the late 50s, early 60s, when people were uh, in their 60s, they were looking to retire. Now, people in their 60s are basically looking for what is the best dating site to go on. People in their 60s are working, competing with people who are in their 30s. The whole college competition is getting to be ridiculous now, that over the next 2 years, U.S. schools will have 1 million more applicants from Japan, India, and China. What do you think that is going to do to try to the student who wants to go to a very elite school? You have quadrupled the amount of pressure that they are going to have. So the one thing that I want you to remember is you do not do better under pressure. You do worse. That is true for the overwhelming majority of people. Now, if you go to the next slide, how does pressure attack you? How does it cause this downgrade in our performance? First of all, you have a piece of paper in front of you, draw a triangle, because that's what your human performance system looks like. That's what pressure does. It attacks your human performance system, which is a combination of your thoughts, your physiology, and your behavior. Thoughts, physical arousal, and behavior are the three components of your human performance system. And what pressure does is that it downgrades, it impacts what I like to call your natural tools. Your natural tools make up your human performance system. One of your natural tools, for example, is your thoughts. Another natural tool that you have is your behavior. Nobody has to teach you how to jump. You just do that automatically. Nobody has to teach you how to start thinking. It happens automatically. And the reason we have these natural tools, our thoughts, our voice, for example, is a natural tool. Nobody has to teach you to make sounds when you are born. It happens automatically. Well, in a pressure situation, your natural tools are not working to their fullest capability. One of the things that pressure does, for example, is that it creates distressful feelings. I already told you that uncertainty is part of every pressure moment. Uncertainty is just another word for anxiety. So when you're in a pressure moment, you start to experience anxiety because you're uncertain about the outcome. When that's taken to an extreme, you respond with panic. What do you think is happening? You've seen a lot of movies where the person can't even move because of fear. They are in a panic stage. When you panic in sports, you end up choking. Your arousal, your physiology gets attacked in a couple of ways. One, it is increased. You get a spiked arousal, your heart starts to zoom, your blood pressure is going up, your respiration rate, you're breathing faster. Many of you also get very rigid. What do you think it means when a person says, you seem kind of tight? What do you think it means when the announcer says the athlete is too tight? And they typically say he or she needs to relax. Relaxation is a natural enemy of pressure. Pressure also distracts you. It distracts your attention. And it distracts your attention by giving you what we call worry thoughts. So that means you're giving a presentation, and the next thing you know, you're thinking, what does my boss think of my presentation? Or you're taking a test. Your son or daughter is taking their SATs. They don't know the first question, so now they start thinking, gee, I'm not going to get into Harvard. I'm not going to get into Yale. Well, those thoughts become very distracting because in the moment, all your son or daughter needs to be thinking about is some math formula, not what's going to happen to him or her if they perform poorly. And it also disturbs your behavior. How do you act in a pressure situation? Many of you get impulsive. You see that again many times in sports. A person does something impulsively because they are too jazzed up. And as I said before, it also disturbs your behavior. It gets you to act in ways that are not in your best interest. So this is how pressure attacks you. It impacts your thoughts, your arousal, your behavior, your attention, all for the worse. What is the answer? This is what I have been studying. You have to be able to learn to manage pressure. Now, the reason that is so important is remember what a pressure moment is. You have something at stake. If you have an interview for a new position and you don't express yourself with articulating, your positives, how you can contribute, if you start to blank on that, you're not going to do well in that interview. It's the same thing if you're taking a test. It's the same thing if you are playing in a company golf tournament or playing tennis with a client. That if you are succumbing to the pressure, you are going to perform poorly. So you see this first phrase, pressure solutions. Pressure solutions are instant strategies, techniques that you can all use 1 minute before a pressure moment. Let's say you're giving a presentation and you're feeling kind of nervous and your presentation starts in a minute. What can you do right there that is going to reduce the experience of feeling pressure? These are pressure solutions, short-term strategies. The longer-term strategies are what I call developing your coat of armor, COTE. Confidence, optimism, tenacity, and enthusiasm. Now think about it. Who invented confidence? Who invented optimism? Who invented tenacity or enthusiasm? And the answer is nobody. These are attributes that evolve over time. The only reason that we have confidence and optimism, tenacity and enthusiasm, is they help us deal with the challenges of life. 100,000 years ago, who would you rather be with? The caveman leader who says to the clan, we're finished. We have no chance of finding food. We might as well pack it up. Or the person who says, come on, let's keep going. I know that we're going to find some food and water around the next mountain. Who do you think has a better chance of survival? So nobody invented these attributes. They evolved. Many of you are familiar with the field of positive psychology. If you actually listen to many positive psychologists talk, they will actually act like positive psychology created these attributes. These attributes were in existence long before any psychologist decided, hey, I can make some money by telling people how to become more confident or optimistic. In fact, an interesting exercise that I would like you all to think about is, let's say that you met a 30-year-old guy or gal who's very confident. What are the experiences you think they had in their life that made them the way they are? That's a very important question, because one of the things that I would recommend is that you have to start to replicate what those experiences are so you can build these attributes or more of these attributes into yourself. Now, let's look at the next slide. The science of pressure solutions. Look at these 5 points here. This is why pressure solutions work, because this is what they do. And notice, this is the opposite of what pressure does. Pressure creates distressful feelings. Therefore, you have to learn how to minimize them. How are you going to minimize your anxiety? How are you going to minimize your fear? How are you going to minimize your feelings of embarrassment? You have to be able to avoid distracting thoughts. You have to be able to regulate your physiology. You have to be able to focus your thoughts and guide your behavior. This is exactly what pressure solutions do. They help you minimize distressful feelings. They help you avoid distracting thoughts. They help you regulate your arousal, focus on your thoughts, and guide your behavior. And if you see the next slide, take a look at the next slide, you will see 15 pressure solutions that help you accomplish that. Now, be clear on something. I did not make up these pressure solutions. In fact, the reality is nobody made them up. They are better described as being discovered rather than invented. They all evolved. And actually, not to promote the book, but I have like 15 here. There are actually 22 in the book. And I like to use the word evidence-based. Now, when I was a graduate student, the term was empirically based. Now the big term is evidence-based. It's like people using the word mindfulness, where 20 years ago, the same concept was self-awareness. So, psychologists are great at coming up with new phrases that refer to the same concept. And I happen to be excellent at doing that. So pressure solutions are evidence-based strategies that means that they've been validated in research literally from around the globe. A lot of the great research in this area is done in the UK and in Australia by many talented sports psychologists. But unfortunately, sports psychologists tend to just focus more on the mental training aspect. We have other strategies here that, as we'll see, have nothing to do with your mental outlook. They require you to do something behaviorally. Now, let's look at the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would say these first 5, another way of phrasing these first 5 pressure solutions is, what is the mindset for somebody who does well in a pressure situation? So this is what I've learned. I have learned what the mindset is. It's the same for anybody who does well in a pressure situation, quite frankly, is doing what I recommend. And if a person doesn't do well in a pressure situation, then they are doing the opposite of what I am recommending. I have just discovered the process. The first is to use your positive GPS. In other words, you are hardwired to be positive, not negative. See, this is why depression is considered a disease, an aberration. Being positive is not considered an aberration. That is the norm. When you are positive, you actually approach a situation with more confidence, with more enthusiasm. Now, some people have had a life that has damaged your internal GPS. This is really a microcosm for being optimistic. It's hard to believe, but if you read the research on optimism, you would be shocked at all the benefits. You actually have to read it, otherwise you think it sounds ridiculous. But in every walk of life, from your health, relationships, work, sports, people who are optimistic do much better than people who are not. And one of the ways that you can start to instill a sense of optimism in yourself is to simply be positive. And that means before a pressure moment, how are you talking to yourself? Are those thoughts helping you, or are they making the situation worse? Let me give you another point, that anytime you are experiencing pressure, that is a signal that how you're talking to yourself is not helping. See, if you're experiencing pressure, you're saying things like, I gotta succeed. I gotta do this. My life is dependent on it, i.e., my job is dependent on it. I'll never get this part if I don't do well. I won't get into Harvard or Yale or any good school if I don't do well on my SATs. Those thoughts are not helping. So one of the things that I would recommend, and again, this is what people do not want to do because it's an effort. It requires energy, is to write down 2 positive statements that you can say to yourself that would help you before any pressure moment. Because remember, when you are positive about something, you approach it without trepidation. Go back 25,000 years on the savannah. So you come to a gap in a pathway that you have to jump 10 feet. Now, 25,000 years ago, remember, if you don't make that jump, you're dead. This is literally a do or die situation. Where do you think the phrase do or die came from? A sports announcer didn't make it up. You're hardwired. Your early pressure moments, many of them, were all do or die situations. Now, who has a better chance to make that jump? The person who says, I think I can do this, or the person who says, I can definitely do this. I can be successful. I think the answer is obvious. So that's the first thing. In any pressure moment, you give yourself an edge for doing your best by being positive. And let me make another important point. Your best might not be good enough. So that's what we don't like to deal with. Just because you do your best doesn't mean you're going to be successful. I'm doing my best right now, but that doesn't mean you're going to say, oh, this was a great webinar. I'm really happy that I signed up. You might say it's terrible. But the fact is, if I don't do my best, it's definitely going to be terrible. So that's an important caveat. A lot of people like to promise success. I don't promise success. I am saying that you increase the likelihood that you will be successful if you can do your best consistently when it matters most. A team can play their best, but that doesn't mean that they're going to win. The other team just might be better. You can have a great interview. You didn't do poorly, but somebody else's interview was better. So that's an important distinction. The second pressure moment that I want you to think about is to befriend the moment. Befriend the moment. Most of us fear the moment. That's why you get anxious. I'm saying to befriend it. And one of the ways that you can befriend it is to think of a pressure moment not as threatening, but as an opportunity. The biggest difference I learned between people who do well in a pressure moment and people who perform below their capability is that the people who do their best are befriending the moment. They see it as an opportunity or as something that is fun. When I first started teaching in business schools. First presentation I remember I gave it was at UCLA. I started to get really nervous. What was I telling myself? Oh, this is really important. These are really important executives. If I don't do well, I'm never going to get another opportunity. My life will be over, and so on. Now, when I give a presentation, it's just the opposite. This to me is an opportunity to share with you some of the findings that I have collected. This for me is fun. So regardless of my actual performance, I will say that pressure is less of a factor because I enjoy being in the moment because it's fun and I see it as a opportunity. So right off the bat, you know that people who do well in a pressure moment are approaching it as a positive and they are looking at it as an opportunity that can move them forward. Tell your kids that a test is an opportunity to show what they have learned. That is much more effective than telling them it is a challenge. Because remember, you can fail a challenge, but it's very difficult to fail an opportunity. The third point goes along with this. Multiple opportunities. Remember, I said that pressure attacks your thoughts. One of the ways that pressure attacks your thoughts is that it creates what I call pressure distortions, particular ways of looking at the world. And one of the biggest is when we have chance of a lifetime. This is the biggest opportunity I'm ever going to get. The reality is there's hundreds of opportunities coming your way. I was giving a presentation one time in Canada to a financial organization. And there maybe were about 500 people in the group. And one young guy raises his hand and he asks the question, how do you deal with the pressure of asking a girl out for the first time? You know, that's a lot of pressure for me, he would say. Before I could even answer, another guy jumped up, a few years older, and he yelled out, just remember, there's 1,000 other girls waiting for the same phone call. Everybody laughed, but everybody knew it was true. How many times have you thought this is the only opportunity I'm ever going to get? When you think in terms of singularity, you actually increase the amount of pressure you are experiencing and you end up doing worse. A quarterback who has one receiver will feel more pressure than a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady, who, when they look out on the field, they see 5 receivers that they can throw to. Multiple opportunities that if somebody is taking a test, always let them know, you know what, if you do poorly on this, you can always take it again. Minimize the importance is another part of that mindset. I alluded to this earlier. Remember, the more important you make something, the more pressure you experience. So that is sort of counterintuitive. It's hard for a manager to tell his staff, this isn't really that important. Now, I'm not saying to tell a person it's not important, but don't go around always saying, this is really important, this is really important. That actually increases the amount of pressure that your staff is going to experience about a project, and therefore they will do worse. Finally, as part of that mental set, anticipate, anticipate, anticipate. One time I was in Houston. I was doing a presentation for an organization called the Institute for Management Studies. It was in Houston. There was a rainstorm, and the power was being held in a country club went out. Well, you know what? I didn't miss a beat. I just kept on going and going and going until the electricity came on. And the reality is, I anticipated that. And when you anticipate what can go wrong in a pressure moment, then you can start to develop strategies in advance. So then when that unexpected event happens, It doesn't throw you off course. Most people, when something unexpected happens, um, have what I call a pressure surge. Your heart zooms up and you start to lose your composure. So look at these five. Start to put these together, because if you have a presentation that you have to give tomorrow, for example, or take a test, or you play in a competitive sporting event with a friend, this is the mental set I want you to have. I want you to be positive. I want you to see it as an opportunity, something that you're going to have a lot of fun in. I want you to realize that it's one of multiple opportunities. Believe me, when I used to first start doing presentations, every opportunity was the biggest one, until I got to the point where I would say, you know what, even if I screw up, so what? There'll be 10 more messages on my phone machine when I get home asking me to speak. So always, again, think of multiple opportunities. Minimize the importance of the situation and anticipate all the things that could go wrong. Jim Palmer, a Hall of Fame pitcher from the Baltimore Orioles, used to have the same exercise every time he pitched. He would mentally walk the first three batters, and then he would visualize himself striking out the side, because he thought if he can do that, he has no problem. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to start to anticipate all the things that can go wrong. What if you're giving an important presentation and all of a sudden um, three people get up in the middle and they have to walk out, or somebody's cell phone goes off? Anticipate, see yourself responding in those situations, because then when they actually happen, it'll be no big deal. One of the other very important pressure solutions is the next one: affirm your self-worth. What that means is, before every pressure moment, see, many people in the working world, I see this a lot with financial advisors, is your entire self-esteem becomes locked in to how well you do at work. So therefore, if you do poorly at work, your self-esteem, your self-worth takes a big knock. It's like your kids who don't get into Harvard, and they start to think that their life is over. One of the things that you should do before a pressure moment is to realize, even if you do poorly, you are still a good person. Now, I know that sounds hokey, but again, there are tons of studies that show that students, employees who take several minutes to validate their self-worth before they go into a pressure moment, A, perform closer to their capability, and B, if they're not successful, they show a greater sense of resiliency, because every time you affirm your self-worth, you're strengthening your ego. And again, one of the take actions that I would tell you to do, remember, I get nothing extra if you do what I say. You get a lot. Is to literally write down what your positive attributes are the night before a pressure moment. One of the reasons that people do poorly in a pressure moment, especially on like a well-rehearsed task, like, how does a pianist who has played the same piece 1,000 times, then all of a sudden they miss a key because they're at Carnegie Hall? See, that's what choking is. And that has to do with many times become overly self-conscious. You start watching yourself. Am I doing it right? Why is a golfer thinking about his swing when he has practiced that swing at least 10,000 times? Now, this is only works if you are a righty. What I would want you to do, you see, I say squeeze a ball, but you can just clench your fists. If you clench your fist seconds before a pressure moment, it interrupts the ruminating thinking in the left side of your brain. That's where the language area is. And it primes the right side of your brain, which is responsible for doing things automatically. So just clench your left fist. What you're doing is you're inhibiting those self-conscious thoughts, and you're priming your body to go and use the muscle memory that you have established through all those times of practice. That's a very effective strategy. Studies have shown that athletes from different sports, when they clench their left fist right before their task, all do statistically significantly better than people who don't. Now, I already see that time is becoming a factor. So rather than panic, I'm just going to skip down to a few. Um, right pressure off. Again, this sounds ridiculous, but I'm telling you, this is what I would tell my team to do before a big presentation to a client. What writing your pressure off means is the night before, write down all your anxieties and fears. Thinking about them doesn't do it. You must write them down, because then the next day when you're in a pressure moment, you have gotten those thoughts out of your system. This is like when you talk about a problem that you have, you're talking about it to all your friends over and over and over, and finally you reach the point, I'm sick of talking about this. It's the same thing. When you're in a pressure moment, all of those anxiety, anxious thoughts, fearful thoughts will be less likely to surface because you have already gotten them out of your system. If I am a coach, I am telling my players the night before a big game, or any game for that matter, to write down their anxieties and fears. And I will tell you something, as a coach, I'm going to collect them, because that is the way that I can force the person to write down their thoughts and feelings. Before the SATs, yes, tell your kids the night before, write down your anxieties and concerns. And I would be encouraging by letting them know that if they do that, they're going to do better the next day. Share your pressure feelings. I would say for males that are listening, um, one of the myths that you have is that you have to handle everything on yourself. And very few males actually like to talk about their feelings because it makes them vulnerable. And vulnerability, most of us perceive as a weakness, especially in the movies. Anytime you see a man being vulnerable, it's like perceived as a weakness. I am saying that sitting down with your partner, sharing the pressure feelings that you are experiencing will actually make you feel better and reduce many of the daily pressure feelings that you have. Talking to your kids. Can any parent deny how much pressure kids are now feeling? Think about all the suicides that are going around on campuses around the country. When was the last time you had a discussion saying to your kids, you feeling any pressure at school? Make them comfortable to talk about their pressure feelings. The one right above that is also interesting. Go first. So you are pitching your product to me, and so are three other people, and you all have 2 minutes to give me your shtick. So I'm going to say, okay, who wants to go first? Conventional wisdom has always been go last so you can hear what other people say. No, just the opposite. Speak up first. You will do better. You will experience less pressure because you will not be distracted by what other people say. If you go forth, then you feel you have to top what other people have said, and you get distracted from your main point. Um, Basketball, you're having a contest with a friend, best out of 10 foul shots, first or second. The key is to go first. Understand why. If I go first and I make my shot, you have to make yours just to tie. If I miss my shot, you still have to make yours to go ahead. Now, when we look at studies from World Cup soccer, NHL shootouts, the team that goes first has a huge statistical advantage. So these are some strategies that will help you seconds before, the night before you go into a pressure moment. If you look at the last slide, I call this polishing your coat of armor. I've selected 4 things that I want you to do every day that are microcosms of confidence, optimism, tenacity, and self-esteem and enthusiasm. The first, affirm your self-worth. Every single day, realize that you are a valuable person, that you have a lot of good attributes because this is going to help build your confidence long lasting. 2, I want you to be positive every day. One of the things that I would tell you to do is next to your bed, I know that only very few of you will do this, but those who do it are going to have an edge, is put a statement next to your bed that if you say it, it'll put you in a good mood. You saw the movie Jerry Maguire. I love getting up in the morning. How many of you actually say that? So take a 5x8 card and write down 2 statements that if you say these statements every single day, you start off in a positive mood. 3, and this helps with tenacity, commit to your best. You know what makes great athletes great is they're in a zone every game. They are not thinking, you know what, I can take it easy today. It's not an important game. Every single day, commit to doing your best. One of the messages that I have taught my kids, that if you do your best every day, good things happen. And finally, I want you to celebrate every day because this is one of the ways of how you will actually create enthusiasm. I want you to celebrate your little successes. If you have a phone call with a prospective client, you didn't get the business, but you had a good phone call, that is a celebration. People in New York will celebrate if they find a parking space. No matter what it is, build celebration. Celebrate your kids. Celebrate your relationship. This is how you bring enthusiasm into your life with confidence, optimism, tenacity, and enthusiasm. Now, there were many, many points that we did not cover, and that is why, as I will reiterate that again, you can contact me. But let's see, we have a question. Here's a question. It says, you bring up a great point about the stigma of men sharing their feelings. What suggestions do you have to help encourage men in business to feel more comfortable to share their emotions openly? Thank you. Well, that is a great question. And let's put it this way. I would say that the punter on the University of Michigan's football team, caller knows what I'm talking about, needs to share his feelings with his teammates. I would say that you have to be comfortable with your feelings and your emotions to begin with. Start using the phrase, I feel. I feel happy. I feel sad. In other words, build your feelings in to your daily language. Start off a meeting. How's everybody feeling today? Ask your kids when they come home from school, how did you feel? Talk about your feelings to your partner. In other words, get comfortable with expressing your feelings by using I feel language. Most of us just talk about our thoughts and facts at work. There's nothing wrong with talking about your feelings. Maybe it's a little easier if you start expressing positive emotions. It's very interesting in the corporate world. It's okay to be enthusiastic, but it's not okay to be angry. Now, why is that? See, the real message is it's okay to express positive emotions, but if you express negative feelings, you become a problem solver. You become a problem, not a problem solver. So I would just say, to summarize, get comfortable expressing your feelings at home first. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. Realize that when you talk about your feelings, it's putting you at risk, but that's okay. 50,000 years ago, anxiety was a positive because it alerted that we're at risk. Today, if you have too much anxiety, it's interesting how things change. It has become a disorder. Listen, I got to thank you. It's 2 o'clock. Thank you very much. For more information, you see, contact hweisinger at msn.com. Follow me at Pressure Tweets. And I'm very excited to announce that in another month, I will have a new e-course. It's not a course. It's what I call an e-experience that will help you perform under pressure. It's a dynamic workshop, as I like to call it, online, great videos. It's going to be a lot of fun, simulated pressure activities. If you email me, contact me at Twitter, I'll give you more information. Thanks again for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you very, very much. Once again, the criteria that we use here at Presentation Excellence is what percentage of the people stay. And once again, you've had 100%